Hello and welcome to the Audio Engineering Society Christmas Lecture here at Glasgow Caledonian University. My name's Knox and I'm going to be speaking about the psychology of sound and music. I'll be talking about music in a moment and I'm going to be doing that with the help of the house band, the Ossicles. Thanks guys. Music is everywhere. It's an important part of our lives and who we are and can have a powerful effect upon us. I'm going to look at important issues underpinning our relationship with music. But before we can do that, we need to look at sound and how it can affect us. Between you and I, there are countless billions of sound molecules, air molecules, excuse me. If something makes a sound, it causes disturbances in those molecules as the sound travels through it. We can't see these disturbances because they're invisible, but we can demonstrate them using a long spring or slinky. This is Dan Russell at Penn State University. And what Dan is doing here when he moves the spring is he's mimicking the creation of a sound and the effect on the surrounding air molecules as it travels through them. If we slow it down, we can see those vibrations take the form of a pressure wave that travel through the medium. If we could freeze those changes in time, we would indeed see it as a waveform, where the peaks or the crests of that wave are points of high pressure, and the troughs of the wave are points of low pressure or rarefactions. Notice when Dan moves that spring, the spring itself moves and stays in the same place, and the sound pressure wave moves along it. Sound can travel through other mediums in precisely the same way, and we can demonstrate that using some very old technology, otherwise known as a tin can telephone. Do we have some volunteers to demonstrate this? Thank you. Hello there. Yeah. And I'd like you to speak into that end, please. And you need to hold the string as tight as you can and just put your ear to that while Scott's speaking, nice and tight. And while you speak into this can, you're causing vibrations in the metal. That forms a pressure wave along the spring, and you should just about be able to hear that at the other end. Can you hear what he's saying? Granted, it is never going to replace your smartphone, but hopefully it kind of demonstrates the fact that sound can travel through other mediums. Thank you very much. Other than air molecules. In fact, sound can travel further and faster through materials that are made up of more densely packed molecules. When the pressure wave reaches us, it's caught by our outer ear or pinna. And those variations travel down the ear canal until they reach the eardrum, and they're converted at that point to mechanical energy via the middle ear bones, also known as the ossicles, where we got the name for the band, and transferred via the oval window to the cochlea, which is this very small shell-shaped object here. It's filled with fluid. As the vibrations pass through the fluid, they pass over hair cells, and they translate those movements into nerve impulses, which travel down the auditory nerve and then onto the auditory cortex in the brain, and it's at this point we perceive it as sound. Let's go back to our waveform. If Miriam were to hit the instrument slightly harder, that would be translated into the peaks becoming further apart in the waveform, and if she strikes a higher pitched part of the instrument, the vibrations are more rapid and the peaks in the waveform get closer together. We can measure the pitch of the sound by examining the peaks in the waveform. If two neighboring peaks are 1 second apart in time, then the frequency of that sound is 1 hertz, 1 cycle per second. If the distance between those peaks is 1,000th of a second, then we have 1,000 cycles per second, 1 kilohertz. The hair cells in our inner ear respond to those changes in frequency, and we hear the sounds at different frequencies or pitches. So we could view waveforms as simply visualizations of sounds. The more complex the sound, the more complex the visualization, the more complex the waveform. This particular waveform represents a sound which has particular significance at this time of year, and we're going to tell you what that sound is at the end of the lecture. As we get older, those hair cells degenerate. This is called presbycusis. The range of frequencies we can hear when this happens becomes smaller. In particular, we lose the ability to respond to higher frequencies. This can start as early as 18 years old. Theoretically, we can hear up to 20 kilohertz, 20,000 cycles per second. But even young adults may only be able to hear frequencies significantly lower than this. We're going to do another little demonstration. We have here a waveform generator, and I'm going to sweep the frequency of a simple sound from a matter of a few hertz up to about 20 kilohertz. And what I'd like you to do is put your hand up if you can hear this sound. And when you get to a point you can no longer hear it, please just put your hand down. So here we have the oscillator. I'll join in. We're now up to about 4 kilohertz. $10,000 Now I have to put my hand down now. We're about 14,000 hertz, and some people in the audience have done too. I'll keep going until all the hands go down. Some still have them up. And now they're all down. We got to 18 kilohertz. So we're not really reaching that theoretical point of 20K, even though there are very few people in this audience that are of the advanced years that I am. So younger people can hear higher frequencies than people who are slightly older. This concept has been, I guess, controversially exploited by people who might not want young people to congregate in particular locations. And what they've done is install a small speaker device called a Mosquito. It emanates very high frequency, unpleasant sound, with the idea that only young people can hear it and they move away from the area. It's very controversial, and I think it's frowned upon now in terms of human rights point of view. Going back to the degeneration of the hair cells in the cochlea, when this happens and it's about old age, there's nothing we can do about that. However, it's also caused or exacerbated by listening to loud sounds or music for prolonged periods of time. So there is some concern right now about people listening to music on headphones for a significant part of the day, and this could accelerate this effect. So we need to take care with our hearing, even at a younger age. Sound can have profound effects upon us. If that startled you, I hope it did. You may have felt the muscles in your upper body contract, your heart rate start to beat a little bit faster, and your breathing to start to go a little bit faster. This is called the startle response. It's a response designed to protect your body from attack. The response is very quick. Our body responds to that sound within 10 milliseconds of it happening, 10,000ths of a second. And those physiological effects, like your heartbeat, start to happen within 1 second of hearing the sound. Your body is readying you for confrontation or to run away, also known as fight or flight. Once you perceive there's no actual threat, your body will return slowly to normal. This response is important because it demonstrates the autonomic nervous system and how it responds to sound. In other words, we can have a bodily response to sound. It needn't be a negative response either. We can have opposite and equal effects, like your heart rate reducing and your breathing being reduced, in response to sounds that are generally the opposite of that very sudden, loud sound. This demonstrates the role of the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for adrenaline and arousal and startle, but also the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for anabolic processes and returning your body to its normal state. So if we understand this, it's perhaps not surprising that exposure to noise can affect our health. Research has shown that exposure to loud or prolonged noise or sound can cause irritation, cause stress, disrupt sleep patterns, cause hypertension, which in turn leads to increased incidence of heart attack. Traffic and aircraft noise in particular have been shown to be linked to reduced cognitive development in children and reading comprehension and memory. So some serious effects. Sound can have positive and negative effects upon us. We can also find certain sounds pleasant and some unpleasant. We'll do another little experiment here where we're going to play you 4 audio clips. And what I'd like you to do is hold up your green or red ear, depending on how you find this sound. So if you think it's a positive sound, hold up your green ear. And if you think it's a negative sound, hold up your red ear. That's excellent. Not a single red ear, so overwhelmingly positive. Next sound. We've got 2 people in the audience like traffic noise. Everybody else finds it rather negative. Next sound. Very negative, very negative. And the final sound. Those results back up what we know already from the research, that we generally have a positive view of nature sounds, rain, wind, birds, and some human sounds such as laughter. We generally have a negative view of sounds like machine noise, traffic noise, the phone ringing, and some human sounds such as crying and even talking. The reasons for these associations may be many and complex. It could be down to a particular sound appearing in an environment where it shouldn't be, in other words, noise pollution. It might be our associations with those particular sounds, imagining ourselves next to a road in an unpleasant environment with very busy traffic. But it's also about the sound and the content itself, and the link to the arousal mechanisms I've just been talking about. The frequencies in the sounds react, or interact, I should say, with the hair cells in the inner ear, just like we've been talking about, and dictate whether the sound is perceived as being consonant or dissonant. This area is generally called psychoacoustics and can underpin the reasons why we might find certain sounds distracting or annoying. Sound can have some unusual and unexpected effects on us. For example, if we're eating some crisps and they sound like this, some research carried out at Cambridge University, no less, discovered that you would find those crisps to be less fresh and less tasty than if they sounded like this. So if your food makes a louder, brighter sound, we perceive it as being fresher and tastier. Thinking about the sound content brings us to musical sound. There are 2 key factors when we think about music. There's the music itself and the person listening to it. Well, what is music? From the point of view of sound, we can think of it as the sounds being produced by different instruments, playing notes at different pitches and for different durations, creating sounds of a different tone or timbre, and we can combine those tones in different rhythms and patterns to create music. Music has been called organized sound. And if this is the case, and music is organized sound, how is it organized? Well, one thing we can focus on is tuning and frequency, pitch, that we've just been talking about. In Western music, the tuning system that predominates is 12-tone equal temperament. So in this system, one note and another note separated from it by 1 octave, in other words, twice the frequency, are separated by a range of frequencies divided into 12 intervals called semitones. Any 2 neighboring tones are separated by a frequency that we perceive as being equal, and that is key. If we play these together, we get a chromatic pitch scale. If we play these notes one after another in a different order, we create what's often called the horizontal aspect of music, in other words, a melody. Or we can play several notes at the same time and create the vertical aspect of music, harmony. And of course, we can put those together and get something that we might recognize as being a more complete piece of music.
2, 3, 4.
Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies. So one simple way we can do this is to change the combination of notes change how we feel they or perceive them as being dissonant or consonant, alter the loudness, tempo, dynamics of the music. And we can do this to change and communicate different feelings or emotion in the listener. What we're going to do now is the band are going to play the same song twice, and they're going to modulate those different parameters. And what we'll do is, at the end of each piece, we'll vote on whether we perceive them as being happy or sad. So red for sad and green for happy. I think we're predominantly happy there. We have some people who are feeling a bit blue today. And the next piece. So sad, yes, I think almost tragic even. As individuals, we may have different views, we may come from different cultures, we will have different experiences, but generally we agree on the emotion being expressed by a piece of music. What the band did there was to change dissonance, consonance, loudness, rhythm, tension, built-in resolution, and that changed the feeling and the mood of the music and how we felt. This has a basis in the psychoacoustic stuff we've just been talking about it, and the autonomic nervous response, but it's also about your particular associations and cultural references. Like the startle response, music can have a strong effect on us. For some, this can translate to direct bodily responses or strong experiences of music. Some people report feeling thrills, chills, shivers, or hair standing up on end when they hear a particular piece of music. And like lots of situations when it comes to music listening, these effects are mediated by the music, the person, and the situation. One good example is film music. Film music is often designed to have strong effects upon us. That piece of music may have had some strong effects on some of you, but not others. Some of those effects are physiological, related to the parasympathetic nervous system, but they can also relate to your associations with that piece of music or your memories. So we're starting to see that it's not just about the music itself, it's also about the person who's listening to it. The person listening to the music plays a very important role in this relationship. One key personal factor in music listening is association. If you hear a piece of music, you may instantaneously associate it with something else. These associations might be general and the same for everyone when they hear a certain piece of music. For example, if you hear this piece of music, we may now all be thinking about owls and wizards. Or they might be a more individual and personal association. This effect has been called the Angels effect after Robbie Williams' song Angels. For some people, you might associate hearing that sound with good times, singing along with friends at a party, for example. For others, it may remind them of, sadly, a relationship that has ended or perhaps losing someone close. So very, very different effects for the same piece of music. These associations may be complex. They're built up over a lifetime. and it may involve lots of different pieces of music. This has been called your personal inner music library. The point here is that the effect of music might be longer lasting than just the startle response or short-term emotional responses. Music can play an important role in our lives, and we associate music with our life events, and this can lead to us referring to music as the soundtrack to our lives. This concept has been used in the media. For example, BBC Radio 2's programme Tracks of My Years invites people to speak about music which played an important part in their lives. The long-running BBC Radio 4 programme Desert Island Discs asks people to bring eight pieces of music, to an imaginary desert island where they've been stranded. This isn't new. Desert Island Discs has been running since 1942. There's something here that chimes with the human experience of music. The next clip you're going to hear is Ed Sheeran on Tracks of My Years talking about music that's important to him.
So that was always playing around the house, was it?
Yeah, that, Beatles, Dylan, Van Morrison, Elton John, always.
Were you sort of pushed into music, do you think, or was it just...
No, because Mum and Dad aren't musical people, but my dad's very passionate about music. He's got a very good record collection, and we just always play stuff.
So it was there, and you sort of drank it in?
Pretty much. I mean, yeah, from a very, very early age. The first album I remember listening to was an album Van Morrison did with the Chieftains called Irish Heartbeat, and my family's Irish, and my dad kind of likes the mix of the two, I think.
So if you listen to what Ed Sheeran's saying there, he's speaking about the music that's played a part in his life. It's reflected his childhood, his relationship with his family, even his family ancestry. So in other words, his life experiences. It's more than just liking a piece of music when people appear on these shows. People feel music is important. They feel it's part of their life story. This concept of having a soundtrack to your life and everything you do might be becoming more common. We are all pretty much carrying about with us a large music collection of our favourite music, and we listen to it every day. We're listening to music in a different way than we used to. People no longer sit down and do nothing else but listen to a piece of music. In fact, one study showed that 90% of people only hear music whilst they're doing another activity. For example, studying, socialising, travelling. Let's have a quick show of hands. How many people here hear music at least once a day? That's pretty much everyone in the auditorium. How about more than 3 or 4 times a day? Music is ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Another study showed that 80% of people hear music at least once every day. And what are the reasons people give for listening to music? Well, the most common reasons given for listening to music are to match or control emotions, to pass the time, for enjoyment, to relax. In other words, music listening is goal-driven. People listen to music to achieve a particular aim. There's a question of choice here. We might choose the music we hear in a solitary activity, like studying, say. But we may have no control over the music we hear in a public place, like the gym or in a shop. And this is important because music, chosen or not, has a significant effect upon us and how we feel. So as I say, we may have no choice over the music we hear in a public place. Music. Background music, elevator music. We might hear this music in lots of different places in our public lives. It affects us. The music we hear in this situation can affect us, and it follows that music we hear in public situations can be manipulated to affect us. The best example of this kind of music listening and its effects comes from studies on consumer behaviour, in other words, the role of music in shops and restaurants, etc. And I'm going to go through a couple of examples here which draw mainly on work from David Hargraves and Adrian North. Their research showed that if you like a piece of music that's been played in a shop, you are much more likely to enter that shop. If they're playing a piece of music you don't like, you're more likely to notice it. In other words, you might find it more annoying. But it's not just about your music preferences and whether you like that music. Music can alter your perception of an establishment. What we're going to do in the next segment is show you 2 short sequences which advertise a restaurant. What I'd like you to do at the end of each segment is to vote using your ears on whether you find those restaurants sophisticated or whether you think they'd be cool. So here's the first one. Red for sophisticated, green for cool. Red for sophisticated, I think, the vote says. And the next sequence. And green for cool. That's interesting because the images for those restaurants came from exactly the same restaurants. The key difference there was the music you heard, of course. This reflects what we know from the research, in that if we play pop music in a cafe or restaurant, people see it as being more lively. If you play classical music, people think it's more upmarket or sophisticated. This doesn't just affect our perceptions, though. It directly affects how much money we spend in those establishments. Some research has shown that if you play classical music in a restaurant, people will spend more cash than if you just play background music. This was shown to be true whether the people in that restaurant were of a certain age, of a certain income, or their musical tastes. Ah, Paris. Thank you. The music's fit for a certain product also affects us. One study showed that when French music was played in a supermarket next to a wine display, much more French wine was sold than German wine. And yes, you guessed it. Very shortly afterwards, when the wine display was accompanied with German music, much more German wine was sold than French wine. So music in public places can affect our behavior, and that includes what we buy and how much money we spend. Going back to arousal levels, research has shown that if you play louder, faster music in a supermarket, people move through that supermarket much more quickly. If you play slow music in restaurants, people spend more time there and they spend more money. So if you're a restaurant owner, play some slow music in your restaurant, people will stay for longer and they will spend more cash. This might be related to our perception of time passing, how distracted we are, our attention to the music, and the amount of information we might be processing while we're waiting. Some companies use this, and they use music to help pass time. And a good example of this is a call center queue. When you're waiting in a queue on the phone, the music chosen in these situations seemed to be chosen to try to please everyone, and the result is bland music which pleases no one.
All of our lines are busy right now, but your call is important to us. All of our lines are busy right now, but your call is important to us. All of our lines are busy right now, but your call is important to us.
I think we've all been in that situation. I think in this context, maybe the music has the opposite effect. Rather, it draws our attention to the fact we are waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm told that's the theme tune to Casualty. Music and health. Like sound, music can have significant effects upon our health and feelings of well-being. Research, including research carried out here at Glasgow Caledonian University, has shown that in clinical and everyday settings, music can reduce anxiety. It can reduce the drug requirements of people with post-operative pain. It can reduce blood pressure, feelings of nausea, and increase our tolerance of pain. These are powerful effects indeed, and they can be measured directly by levels of cortisol and immunoglobulin A in our saliva, indicators of stress. Using music in a health context and for health is attractive, not least because it's cheaper than some other interventions, and it can facilitate early release from care. Given this is the case, what music has this positive effect? Again, it's down to the music, the person, and the situation you're in. Strong positive effects have been shown for music you like. This might be down to memories you have of that piece of music, your emotional engagement with it, or its ability to distract you from a negative stimulus. No one piece of music is going to have the same effect on everyone. In fact, your individual music choices might be more strongly linked to you than you might think. Going back to the music content, you may have a preference for a certain sound of music, and this is genre, defined by certain instruments, tempo, arrangements, etc. Genre is a broad brush, but it gets complicated. People disagree about which genre a piece of music belongs to, and in fact, artists themselves disagree about the genre their music belongs to. This may be down to the fact they don't want to be pigeonholed in such a simplistic way. However, genre can be useful in that we can describe music rather easily in this way, and we can easily respond and recognize music that belongs to a certain genre. What the band will do now is play you two pieces of music, and after each piece we'll ask you what you think that genre is. Do you have someone from the audience who might want to suggest what that music was? Rock? Yeah. Marginally. Someone else? Funk? Funk rock crossover, perhaps? Shall we have our next piece of music? Any takers for that piece of music?
Lounge jazz.
Lounge jazz, that's perfect. Extremely lounge, I think. So, generally we agree on broad genres of music. You might recognize the following music clip as being electronic music. Electronic music, yes, but very few people in the audience, I presume, recognize those subgenres, which were glitch, breakcore, and lo-fi, which of course I recognized instantly. So, genre's a broad brush, but it can be useful, not least because it can play a role in how we identify ourselves through our music tastes. And we can transmit our music tastes and our preferences in different ways. For example, through the way we dress. And what we have here is two very, very stereotypical music fans. And what we'd like to do is get your opinion on the kind of music you think this chap here might like on the left. Heavy metal? Death metal, subtle distinction between the two, yes. Anyone else? Goth? Yeah, we're in a thread there. And the chap on the right here?
Classic.
Classical music?
Hip-hop.
I think, yes, very, very stereotypical, yes. However, we can use style in the way we dress to communicate our musical tastes. We can also use this to transmit information on who we are. What I'm going to do now is hand out some questionnaires to some people in the audience. I think we have them over there. Some short questions on your perceptions of these two music fans, even though you've never met them before. And what we'll do slightly later in the talk is come back to those results and discuss them. Thank you, chaps. So, whether our music tastes affect the way we dress, or just how we identify as fans of a certain type of music, music can be a medium through which we express our identity. Research has shown that in zero acquaintance situations, in other words, situations where you're meeting someone for the first time, 60% of people choose to speak about the music they like, and that's opposed to 40% of people who speak about movies or sports. Young people are of a special interest here because of their increased involvement with music in adolescent years. They listen to music for the same reasons we all do, such as to regulate mood. But if asked about the reasons why they listen to music, they give some interesting answers. And they say things like listening to be cool, listening to create a self-image, or listening to please others. These quotes tell us there's something else going on here, and we've created a short animation to take you through some of those issues. Music can be an important part of how we see ourselves. Young people particularly rely on their peer networks to form an identity and also how they see themselves. We may identify ourselves as part of a group in terms of similar musical tastes and therefore shared values and interests. They can use music as a way of forming relationships with peer groups by expressing their music preferences. For example, bands and music they like. So we might judge people by their musical tastes and how they express those preferences. We might compare ourselves to groups who may have different tastes, values and music preferences. These are the out groups, which are seen negatively. Those who share the same music tastes are the in group, which is viewed positively. We can maintain positive relationships with our in group by exhibiting appropriate musical behaviour. This helps develop identity, enhance self-view, and has a positive effect on self-esteem. Many thanks to Angela Hind for creating that animation for us. So, music can be used to create an identity, identify belonging to a certain group, and also to set yourself apart from other groups. This has interesting uses in the real world. One UK-based supermarket chain wanted to stop youths, adolescents, teenagers from congregating outside their supermarkets. And what they did was they put speakers in place outside the supermarkets and they played classical music very loud. This worked very well. In fact, it worked so well that they invested over £100,000 putting that technology in their other stores. This was variously reported in the media to show that young people don't like classical music. But given what we've just heard, we would rather say that young people might not want to be seen to be associated with classical music by their peer group. This is interesting because music choices can actually say something about your personality and how people see us. Young people, especially, see music as part of who they are and how they want to be seen by other people. For example, if you want to be seen as sophisticated and intelligent, you might express a preference for esoteric music. In other words, music no one else has heard of, unsigned bands, etc. Someone expressing an outward preference for heavy metal might be trying to convey an image of being tough or nonconformist. This is interesting because it can communicate real aspects of identity. One piece of research from a few years back showed that people with preferences for broad types of music shared common personality traits. They showed that people who liked intense and rebellious music, such as punk, metal, etc., increasingly enjoyed risk, they were physically active, and they enjoyed or were open to new experiences. Compared to people who liked upbeat and conventional music, in other words, pop music, who were overwhelmingly conscientious, more conservative, and they saw themselves as being more physically attractive. Let's look at the results from our questionnaire earlier on, if we've got them. We don't quite have them yet, we'll move on. This research shows that people believe that the personality, your personality, even if they've never met you, can be judged by your music tastes and the way you dress. They base these assumptions on stereotypes of fans of certain types of music. This communication is certain up to a point. It's successful, I should say, up to a point. It expresses real aspects of who we are, and other people can deduce them from just by looking at us and knowing something about our musical taste, even though they've never met us. So given this, using music as a conversation point when you meet someone for the first time might be a good way of getting to know them. So, we might be happy to broadcast our music preferences and music tastes. We might do that to enhance people's perception of us and how we see ourselves. You might do this by the way you dress, by wearing a particular band t-shirt, or just telling people. There we go, we have the results back. Yep. So, lots of people think that our rock fan is much more open to new experiences than our classical music fan. Our classical music fan is much more conservative than our rock music fan. Oh, our classical music fan and rock music fan are equally extroverted. So I'm not sure where people are getting that from, the chap on the right. And our heavy metal fan is more likely to take risks. Thanks for that. So that chimes with the research I've just been talking about. So we might tell people about the music we like for these reasons. What we are more likely to do nowadays, though, is do this via social media. If you listen to music on Spotify, they will publish your listening habits on your profile page, and that will be copied over to your Facebook profile. We are sensitive to this information being seen by certain people. We might want to hide some of our music listening habits from our peer group. This is the concept of guilty pleasures. In other words, music we love, but we do not want others to know about. The key here is not wanting to be associated with it, presumably because it is incongruent with our self-view in some way. For example, someone who is sophisticated and has very refined tastes, or they want to be seen that way, might not want people to know their favourite act is Meghan Trainor, for example. Our heavy metal fan here might not want people to know that this is his favourite song.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving.
In other words, he may not want to be seen as uncool. However, I fear it's too late for that. Sean Rowley, a DJ at BBC Radio London, has developed the idea of guilty pleasures. He's developed this into a nightclub and a series of CDs. And at these nights, people embrace uncool or cheesy music. Given what we've been discussing, we might see this now as a release from the societal expectations of people and their perception of the music you like. Rather, it's about the love of the music itself. Sean Rowley said, "These records release really powerful emotions. Listening to them is incredibly potent. They release or they have that pure sugar rush effect." The tracks you see listed here are from the Guilty Pleasure CDs. They're not bad music. Rather, we might see them as music that young people in particular are embarrassed about or don't want to be seen to be enjoying. On the subject of embarrassment, perhaps no one has more power to embarrass young people than their parents. And a good example of this is dad dancing. The definition from the Oxford Dictionary is, for dad dancing, an awkward or unfashionable dancing to pop music as characteristically performed by middle-aged or older men. And we have a video to demonstrate this phenomenon. From a serious point of view, intergenerational music relationships can be complex. We've seen earlier that your family can play a big role in your development of your music tastes. However, from an identity point of view, setting yourself apart from your parent group as a young person is a normal identity development stage. So what might separate the generations in terms of music? As a young person, the music choices of your parents may be seen as uncool. You may not want to express a preference for those music types to your peer group. Older people are generally unfamiliar with the music of younger people. You have no personal associations with that music. You may not want to be seen to identify with the values of teenagers and young people if you're an older person. As we get older, our personalities change less. If these are linked to our music preferences, then perhaps we become less willing to become associated or listen to music that is associated with other personality types. So there are personality and sociological issues and differences here, but it's also about the music. Some research has shown that older people have a preference for quieter, low arousal, low intensity music, where younger people prefer high intensity music with a faster tempo. So perhaps it's unsurprising that the generations might be divided by dubstep, which sounds like this. I've been talking here about how music separates us. Now finally, let's look at how music might bring us together. Live music concerts are perhaps the ultimate outward expression of music preferences and the love of music. It involves our peers and embraces the social aspect of enjoying music. It's also a situation in which many people report experiencing strong experiences of music, thrills, chills, and goosebumps. We can see that demonstrated here with a clip of Tea in the Park, the crowd here. Yes, that man was wearing a chicken on his head. To summarize, we have lots in common about how sound and music affect us. From arousal, physiological response, recognition of mood and emotion, the beneficial effects of music listening are powerful and can affect us all. But your individual music preferences are unique to you. They're based on your life experience, how you use music in everyday life, your personality, your relationship with your friends and family and peers, and how you choose to communicate aspects of your life and who you are through your music choices, or hide them in the case of guilty pleasures. So in light of this, having arguments about which music is the best are unlikely to end in agreement. But in the spirit of democracy, we can vote on it. I'm going to welcome back Steve Connor and his Tesla coil. And what Steve's going to do now is play us through the best top 10 tracks ever.
Well, Pop Pickers at number 10, we have, coming up shortly at number 10, Pop Pickers, we have Radiohead with There. Coming in at number 9, you voted for British Sea Power with Remember Me. Coming in at 8, we have the fabulous Johnny Cash with the fabulous track Hurt. And then coming in at number 7, number 5, we have the Killers with Mr. Brightside. What's their number 4? It's The National with Blood Bud Ohio. Coming in at number 3, you voted for Elbow, One Day Like This. At number 2, we have the Arctic Monkeys, I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor. And what was your top track? At number 1, we have Coldplay with Clocks.
Thank you, Steve. I should note that that top 10 was voted for by listeners to BBC Radio Music 6 Music. Feel free to disagree. If you want to read more about the topics that I've been discussing, you can go to this website and look at the work of the researchers whose work I've been talking about. You can see links to the sounds, music, and images that we use today. Finally, a quote, given what we're talking about the influence, power, and importance of music. Plato said, music gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything. One final thing before we go back to the waveform we had at the start of the show, and we can now reveal this sound which I said had special significance at this time of year.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye and have a Merry Christmas.